She begged for work in rags, but the rich rancher asked, "Will you be the mother my girls need?" Frontier Springs, Colorado Territory, late autumn 1885. The sun hovered on the horizon, casting long shadows over Frontier Springs. Red dust whispered across wooden fences. Wind rattled shutters and lifted stray hay. The town's boardwalks glowed in dying light. Down the main road, Mary Bennett trudged forward, her skirts tattered, her shoes worn to flapping leather. She carried a ragged basket at her side, knuckles white with effort, skin bronzed by the Sunday. She came to the gates of Rancho Silverleaf, a mansion of pale stone, wide verandas, and carved pillars. The property lay silent as a fortress. Mary hesitated a moment, swallowed hard, then stepped forward. Her foot caught in a rut. She stumbled and fell, knees scraped, basket tilting. A man's voice barked from a balcony. She rose shakily, clutching her skirt, eyes red. "Please, sir, I beg for work. I have no home, no coin." Her voice cracked like dry wood. A tall figure in a dark suit emerged at the gate. The steward, a lean man with sharp eyes. He took one look at Mary, and his lips curled. "Go back to the streets," he said coldly. "We don't hire drifters, vagrants, or those who carry dust on their souls." Mary pressed her lips shut, head bowed. She glanced up through her lashes at another tall figure appeared behind the steward. Jacob Sterling stood framed in the doorway, coat of dark leather, hairstreaked with silver. His frame strong and unyielding, his eyes were hard. Surveying her from boots to bonnet, the fading sun cast his face in bronze and shadow. Mary's heart thudded, her fingers shook. Would he send her away as others had? He stepped forward, his spurs clicking on the stone. He addressed her in a steady voice. "You ask for work, but what makes you think you are fit to care for my daughters?" Mary drew in a breath, struggling for courage. "My husband died under debt and threat. Our land was lost in disputes. I had to leave. I have no place left to turn." Her words tumbled out, ragged but earnest. She felt every eye upon her. Servants, ranch hands, leaning against fence rails, the steward behind Sterling's shoulder. Jacob's expression remained inscrutable. After a long pause, he spoke with authority. "If you stay, you will be judged by every servant, every ranch hand on this property. You accept that?" Mary's chest tightened, her pulse thundered, yet she nodded, voice small but firm. "Yes, sir, I accept it." He turned his back, his silhouette sharp against the fading sky. "You will begin tomorrow," he said. "I make no promises of wage beyond a place to live and your meals. If you prove yourself fit, there may be more." Mary's throat constricted. She swallowed hard. She had asked for a chance. This was it. She stepped forward, crossing the threshold of the gate. Each inch felt heavier than the last. The steward and ranch hands parted, letting her through. The dust kicked up around her skirts. Jacob watched her walk the drive, his figure still unmoving behind the gate. Mary felt eyes on her back, disbelief, envy, suspicion. Yet she held her chin high. She would not shrink away. In that moment, she ceased to be only a beggar in rags. She became someone daring to hope. As the gate clanged shut behind her, Eleanor, no. Mary Bennett exhaled a trembling breath. She stood inside ranch walls that were once impenetrable. She had passed a threshold, not just the gate, but the barrier between despair and possibility. A murmur rose behind her, but for once she did not flee. She stood her ground, heart echoing with fear and resolve. The first chapter of her life at Rancho Silverleaf had begun, frail but real in the uncertain light of dusk under the watchful eyes of Jacob Sterling. Dawn broke pale over Rancho Silverleaf. Mary rose before the first bird song, lantern in hand, knuckles white with nerves. She dressed in patched but clean clothes, tied her hair back, and stepped softly into the kitchen. The first task, prepare breakfast for household. She stoked the fire, rinsed pans, boiled oatmeal over flickering flames, and set the table. The large hearth echoed in the empty rooms as though watching. She carried the steaming bowls into the children's nursery, her heart pounding. "Good morning, Clara Anna." She spoke softly, gentle, tender. She tapped Clara's door. The older child's eyes fluttered open, and Anna stirred beside her. Mary knelt and lifted a bowl with careful hands. Clara balked when Mary reached out to steady her hand. The toddler pulled away and cried, shrieking, "Don't touch me." Mary froze but did not flinch. She laid her palm on her own chest, leaned forward, and whispered, "It's okay." "I am here." She stretched out her arm again, slower. She stroked Clara's back softly, murmured reassurance. The child's sobs quieted, her tears damp on her cheek as Mary held her hand gently. In the hallway from behind door frames, the ranch hands and old housemaids watched. Some exchanged glances. One among them whispered under her breath, "That street girl. How does she suppose to tame those two spoiled little ladies?" Another muttered, "She's nothing but dust and ragged shoes." The children's nurse, now replaced, sneered as she passed by Mary, her lips pressed tight in judgment. Mary's fingers trembled as she served porridge to Anna, offering a gentle, "Here, Anna." Bite slowly. She ruffled Anna's hair and offered water. Her every movement was careful, her voice quiet but kind. Above, Jacob Sterling observed from the balcony landing, his silhouette sharp against morning light. He watched Mary arrive early every day, scrub the floor, wash dishes, sweep the entries. She never complained. She never looked away. Her eyes, though anxious, held determination. One day, as Mary fed Anna, the little girl suddenly started to cough violently. Milk stuck in her throat. Mary sprang up, turned the cup aside, lifted Anna to her chest. She patted her back, whispered, "Anna, hold still." Her hand pressed lightly, chest supporting. The child's cough eased, tears in her eyes. Jacob descended the steps, expressions stern. He studied Mary carefully. "You know, children?" he asked. His voice was firm, but curious. Mary swallowed. Her chest rose and fell. In a trembling voice, she said, "I had 2 brothers I raised after father died. I learned early how to soothe small ones." Jacob said nothing further. He met her eyes a moment, then turned away without comment. Mary exhaled, relief and dread mingling in her chest. That night, Mary lay on her mattress in a small servant room. The wind rattled the shutters. She heard the roar of night winds, the rustling of leaves, cracks in the timber. She pulled her covers close. Her thoughts raced. She replayed every glance, every whispered comment by the staff, every silent judgment. Would Jacob trust her? Would the children accept her? Was she simply an interloper in a world she did not belong to? Her dreams drifted uneasy. Shadows in the halls, harsh whispers, cold stares. In the darkness, Mary whispered into the night, "Please let me stay. Please let me belong." She folded her hands against her chest, listening to the distant groan of wind and the heavy beating of her heart. Sleep came slowly, as if granted by mercy, and in the hush of that night, Mary understood every sunrise now would test her resolve. She would have to prove, not through words, but through every small deed, that she was more than rag and ruin. She was hope. Walking in the gates of Silverleaf, Mary sat at the window of her small room in the ranch house, watching moonlight dance across the fields. The pale beams stirred memories she had long buried. She clasped her hands tightly, trying to steady her breath as the past unfolded in her mind. Years ago in the town of Cedar Creek, Mary and her husband had owned a small homestead. They tilled land, planted crops, raised a child, but greedy neighbors, emboldened by a corrupt judge, accused them of trespassing a boundary. The land was seized. Threats came in the night, shots fired into walls. Animals driven off, windows smashed, the house broken. Mary clutched her young child in her arms while the men tore wood, smashed doors. They fled in the dark with nothing but the clothes on their backs and her child's fever in his chest. The night was cold, bitter with wind. Her little boy cried with fever, his skin burning, and Mary held him close as she ran through a storm of fear. She begged the dust to swallow her. In the days that followed, the child was lost to sickness. No medicine, no time, no mercy. Mary tucked away that grief like a dagger in her heart. Now, in the hush of Silverleaf's night, she felt again the sharp ache of that loss. Her throat tightened. She thought of Jacob's daughters, Clara and young Anna. She laid her head against the window frame and wept silently for the child she lost and for the guilt she carried. The next morning, Clara came to her as Mary prepared food. The little girl's eyes were brimming. "Will you stay, Mama?" she asked softly, voice small. Mary froze. A painful echo of her past mothering surged within her. Tears threatened. She swallowed hard, forcing a calm voice. "Yes, Clara, I will stay with you." But her heart trembled as though the promise might shatter. Later that day, Jacob passed by Mary's door and heard soft sobs. He paused, then knocked. She sat on the floor in her room, face hidden, tears still wet on her cheeks. He entered. She tried to compose herself. He asked quietly, "Mary, what is it?" She wiped her eyes and answered, voice shaky, "I have ghosts that follow me, memories I can never outrun." Jacob's face did not soften. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned and left, closing the door gently behind him. Mary held her breath. She understood then. He did not deny her pain. He simply chose not to push further. He witnessed it. That silent acknowledgment was perhaps more than many had given her. Through the rest of the day, she worked with quieter intensity, trying to bury grief beneath chores. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw the night they lost everything. The burning logs, the cries, her arms empty where a baby once lay. Every time she brushed Clara's hair or fed Anna, she felt the weight of expectation that she must prove herself a mother worthy of two souls who had never known her. Mary struggled between fear and commitment. She feared she would fail these children. She feared Jacob would regret hiring her once her past was fully known. But she also felt a strange resolve stirring. If she could stand here, broken but willing, maybe she could rise. At dusk, she went to the small garden behind the house. She knelt in the lawn, pressed a seed into the soil. The earth felt cool beneath her fingers. She thought of the child she lost. Ghosts she carried and planted hope instead. Mary lifted her face to the sky, tasting wind. And Sunday she whispered to Clara, to Anna, to the memory of her son, "I am staying. I am working. I am here." And though fear still shadowed her heart, she felt a fragile strength kindle within. The wounds of the past would always shape her, but not define her. She would walk forward, scars and all, into this life she had begged to enter. The fever came slowly, but it clung to Mary like a second skin. Her limbs etched, her breath shortened, and every movement felt like walking through molasses. Still, she rose early, determined not to let her weakness show. But Jacob noticed. That morning, before the others stirred, Mary found a small tin cup of water and a folded cloth soaked in herbs by her bedside. She blinked at it, confused, until the shadow crossed her doorway. Jacob stood there. "You're burning up," he said plainly, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "You need to rest." "I can manage." "No." He stepped inside, set a bowl of steam on the nightstand. "You don't need to prove anything right now." Mary lay back, speechless. Jacob dipped the cloth again and pressed it gently to her forehead. His fingers were calloused but sure, the care unspoken but undeniable. She watched him through half-lidded eyes as he arranged the blanket over her shoulders and silently left the room. The next day, Clara woke up coughing, her small face flushed red with heat. Mary sat up despite her own weakness and pulled the girl into her lap. "SHH, sweetheart," she whispered, stroking Clara's hair. "I'm here." Anna cried too, frightened by her sister's illness, and Jacob appeared, a rare look of concern breaking through his usual composure. He stood by the doorway, hands fisted at his sides as Mary soothed both children. "Do you need anything?" he asked finally. Mary shook her head. "Just time." He nodded and disappeared down the hall, but not before glancing back once more, long enough for Mary to catch a flicker of something in his eyes. Something tender. Days passed. Mary grew stronger, and so did Clara. One morning, as sunlight filtered through the nursery window, Mary placed a charcoal pencil into Clara's hand. "Try this," she said, guiding the small fingers over parchment. CLRA. The little girl beamed. I did it. Mary kissed the top of her head. Yes, you did. In the afternoons, Anna would sit at her feet, humming softly while Mary hummed along, their voices weaving melodies that warmed the once cold hallways of Rancho Silverleaf. Jacob watched from the second-floor landing, always from afar, like a man uncertain how to rejoin a world he had stepped away from. One evening, Mary stood on the wooden porch, arms wrapped around herself as the wind rolled over the prairie. The sky stretched purple and gold, dusk settling in slow and quiet. Jacob stepped beside her. I saw Clara writing her name, he said. She's clever. Just needed someone to believe she could. He nodded. You're doing more than I ever expected. Mary looked at him, her voice soft but firm. I only tried to deserve this chance. He turned to her, his eyes unreadable in the fading light. You do more than that. They stood in silence, the wind rustling the dry grass, the house behind them pulsing with life. Not noise, not chaos, but warmth. In those moments, Mary standing tall despite her past. Jacob leaning just a little closer to the world he had locked out. They both began to believe in something again. Not perfection, not miracles, but trust. Slowly, surely, something was being built between them, something that neither of them dared name. The wind howled low across the dry plains of Frontier Springs, curling around fence posts and rattling shutters like a warning. Jacob Sterling stood in the barn, oil lamp in hand, inspecting the grain stores when he heard the gate creak open. 3 riders approached in the dying light, faces shadowed beneath wide, brimmed hats, dust settling in thick clouds behind them. Jacob stepped forward slowly, the weight of his revolver heavy at his side. One dismounted, a sharp-eyed man in a black coat, silver badge gleaming under his lapel, though he was no lawman. Mr. Sterling, he said, voice slick as snake oil. Mr. Langley sends his regards. Jacob narrowed his eyes. Langley should keep his regards and his men. The man grinned, but it never reached his eyes. You've got good land, Sterling. Silverleaf's got water, good grazing, and you've been turning down every offer. Langley's not the patient kind. This is your last chance. Jacob didn't flinch. Tell Langley this land's not for sale. Not now. Not ever. The man tipped his hat mockingly. Then you'd best be ready. Storm's coming, and it don't just bring wind. They rode off into the dusk, hooves echoing like a bad omen. Inside the main house, Mary hummed softly as she ladled stew into bowls for Clara and Anna. She did not notice the faint shimmer on the wooden spoon, nor the odd taste when she tested the broth, but someone had been watching her from the trees near the back window, silent, waiting. It wasn't long after the girls had gone to bed that Mary's legs buckled beneath her. Bowl slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Her breath came shallow. She stumbled to the table, grabbing at nothing, and then crumpled. Mary. Clara's voice rang out upstairs. Jacob was at her side within seconds, kneeling beside her limp form. Her skin was clammy, lips pale. He touched her cheek, heart-pounding. Mary, open your eyes, please. But she didn't. Without wasting another second, Jacob swept her into his arms. Saddle my horse. He bellowed toward the ranch hands. Now the wind had picked up outside, fierce and sharp. Jacob wrapped Mary in his coat, mounted the horse, and thundered into the night, her head against his chest. Don't you leave me, he whispered over and over. Not now, not after everything. The road to Millstone Outpost was rough, winding through dark ridges and frozen creeks. Mary barely stirred, her breath shallow and uneven. By the time they reached the warm lights of a roadside inn that doubled as a small medical post, Jacob was trembling. He carried her inside, yelling for help. The old nurse on duty ushered them into a back room. What did she eat? She asked sharply. Stew, Jacob said, breathless. She made it herself. The nurse sniffed the edges of the cloth Mary had coughed into. Belladonna, low dose enough to stop the heart. Jacob palled. She was poisoned. The nurse nodded grimly, but not beyond saving. Hours passed. Jacob sat beside her, hands shaking, refusing to move. As dawn approached, Mary stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. Jacob, his head snapped up. "I'm here." She reached weakly for him, and he grasped her hand like it was his only lifeline. "I thought I lost you," he whispered, voice cracking. "I won't lose you." Back at the ranch, one of Jacob's ranch hands, suspicious of the hired cook's sudden disappearance, tracked the stranger through the woods and brought him in. The man broke under pressure, confessing that the local mining baron, Langley, had promised him land and money if he could make Jacob distrust the new woman. "She was the easiest mark," the man spat. "All you had to do was stir doubt." Jacob stared at him, face carved in stone. "You tried to poison the heart of my house." Later, as Mary rested, Jacob sat outside her door, hat in his hands, heart full of silent fury and something else, something deeper, something dangerously close to love. The bell in the town square tolled before noon, sharp and urgent. A crowd had begun to gather even before the dust settled from the riders. Word spread fast in Frontier Springs. Jacob Sterling was to be accused in a public forum, and Mary Bennett was at the center of it. Mary stood near the courthouse steps, shoulders tight beneath her simple shawl, her hands clenched together. Her heart thundered louder than the murmurs of the crowd. Langley was already there in his dark waistcoat and polished boots, flanked by his lawyers and men. He raised a hand, calling for silence. "This town has always prided itself on order," he began. "But when a rancher harbors someone with ties to outlaw territories and uses that association to secure land, well, we must ask, who are we becoming?" Eyes turned toward Mary, some uncertain, others judgmental. A woman whispered, "She's not from here, never was." A man muttered, "She came in rags and now lives like a lady." Mary's throat tightened. She glanced around looking for Jacob. He was not beside her. Langley sneered. "She is not a wife, not a widow of any name we know. No papers, no property, no proof of anything but trouble. Are we to allow such a woman to mother two of our town's own?" Suddenly, a voice cut through the crowd, low but firm. "She is not your accusation." Jacob Sterling stepped through the mass, tall and commanding, dust clinging to his boots and collar. His eyes burned with quiet fury. "She is my answer," he said. The crowd stilled. Mary swallowed, blinking rapidly. Jacob moved to stand beside her. "This woman has done more for my daughters in weeks than most could do in years. She taught them not just letters and songs, but kindness, strength, patience. She has brought peace to my home." Langley's lips twisted. "She has no claim. I gave her one," Jacob said. "I chose her." Mary's breath hitched. She turned to look at him. Truly look, his gaze steady, anchored in her as if nothing else mattered. From the crowd, an old man stepped forward, white beard, worn boots. It was Mr. Ellison, a widower who rarely spoke. He lifted his cane and said, voice cracked but strong, "I saw this girl arrive in rags. I thought she'd last a week, but now I've seen her cradle sick children, mend broken fences, plant hope in dry soil." He looked to the others. "We judged wrong." I see love in her eyes now, and in his toya a hush settled. No one dared reply. Langley's jaw tensed. He gave a small tight nod, then turned and strode off, his men trailing behind like shadows. Defeated by the Sunday, Jacob turned to Mary. She stood frozen, lips parted. The square had fallen silent, yet the air buzzed with something unspoken. He reached for her hand right there in front of everyone and held it gently. "You don't owe them an explanation," he said. She blinked back tears. "But you gave me a voice. You always had one. I just made sure they heard it." A soft wind stirred the dust, lifting the edge of her shawl. The crowd began to disperse, some with bowed heads, others with new respect in their eyes. No one spoke harshly. No one shouted. They only watched as Jacob led Mary back toward Rancho Silverleaf, her head high, her hand still in his, and for the first time, she did not feel like someone borrowed. She felt like someone chosen. The days that followed felt softer. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows of Rancho Silverleaf, catching dust motes in its golden beams. Mary stood in the newly painted nursery, once faded and forgotten, now blooming with life. She had stitched bright curtains from old linens, hung letters of the alphabet above the hearth, and laid out small chairs for the girls from the village who came each afternoon. "All right. Let's start with the letter M," she said cheerfully, chalk in hand. "M for Mary," Clara shouted from the back. Mary chuckled. "Yes, and also for miracle, which is what you are." Anna giggled. Wriggling in her seat, the other girls, eager and messy, mimicked the letters with their fingers in the air. Outside, Jacob watched through the open window, his arms crossed, boots dusty from the day's labor, but his expression, usually guarded, was quietly full. Later, Mary stepped onto the porch where Jacob was kneeling beside a patch of dirt under the window. "You're planting?" she asked, surprised. Jacob looked up. "I figured the girls could use a bit of color around here." Mary knelt beside him. "Let's make it sunflowers. They're hard to break, like Clara and like you." He gave a soft grunt of amusement. "I always liked sunflowers. They work side by side, hands brushing occasionally in the soil." He passed her a bulb. She pressed it into the dirt. Their rhythms sked. Over the weeks, the ranch shifted. Laughter returned to the halls, drifting from the small schoolroom to the kitchen. Clara and Anna ran barefoot through the grass, skirts flying, shouting rhymes Mary had taught them. The maids began to hum again. The ranch hands tipped their hats not just to Jacob now, but to Mary too. One evening, dark clouds rolled over the hills, and rain poured down hard. Mary raced through the halls, gathering quilts. She folded them at the end of Clara and Anna's beds, smoothing corners, checking for leaks in the windows. Jacob joined her, carrying extra firewood, placing it by the hearth. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," he said simply. They stood in the glow of the fire, the girls asleep behind them, listening to the wind against the glass. Mary turned to him, her voice low. "Why did you trust me when no one else would?" Jacob didn't answer immediately. He sat on the edge of the hearth, eyes on the flame. "Because I saw something in you," he said at last, "something that reminded me of what I lost." Mary sat beside him. "What was that?" she asked. He looked at her, not through her, not past her, but into her. "Hope," he said. "Kindness, even when you were empty, a fight that hadn't burned out." Silence fell again, not awkward, but heavy with meaning. Mary reached over slowly, her fingers finding his hand. This time, it wasn't accidental or hesitant. She placed her hand over his, steady and warm. It was the first time she had ever touched him like that, out of choice, not obligation or need. Jacob didn't move away. His thumb gently brushed hers. Outside, the rain softened into a steady rhythm. Inside, something took root. Not sudden, not loud, but certain. And as the fire crackled between them, Mary knew this was no longer about survival. It was about beginning. 1 year later, Rancho Silverleaf breathed with life. Children's laughter spilled from the porch. The garden bloomed with bright flowers, marigolds, daisies, and wild bluebells swaying in the breeze. The gentle ringing of a school bell drifted over the hills as young girls ran barefoot through the yard, books tucked under arms, ribbons fluttering. The once solemn halls of the ranch now echoed with footsteps, giggles, and the creak of wooden floors. Worn by joy, Mary stood by the nursery window, brushing back her hair with flour-dusted fingers. Her apron bore traces of morning baking, and the scent of fresh bread still lingered in the air. She wore a simple blue dress, clean, well-fitted, carefully mended in places. Her boots, though scuffed, were polished. Her posture was taller now, not proud, but grounded like someone who had found her place and earned every inch of it. Outside, Jacob stood on the front porch, his jacket crisp, boots shining. His silver-streaked hair caught the sun. and beside him stood Clara and Anna, holding wildflower bouquets. Their dresses swayed in the afternoon breeze, eyes wide and cheeks pink with excitement. The townsfolk gathered in the yard, neighbors, ranch hands, even those who once cast judgment, curiosity mixed with something softer now, admiration, maybe even reverence. Some had doubted, some had whispered behind hands, but all had returned to witness what could only be called a quiet miracle. Jacob cleared his throat. The crowd hushed. Today he began, his voice firm but warm. I ask Mary Bennett to stand not only as the woman who mended this home, but as mother to my daughters and as partner in this life. Gasps rippled gently through the gathering. Mary, standing near the porch steps, froze. Her hands were still slightly dusted with flour. Her heart thundered. Her eyes darted to Clara, whose cheeks were already wet with tears. Anna stepped forward, tugged Mary's skirt, and whispered, "Mama Mary." Jacob descended the steps, walking toward her slowly. In his hand, a small silver ring glinted in the sunlight. "I don't have gold," he said softly, stopping just before her. "But this belonged to my mother. It's the only thing I saved when I built this ranch." Mary's breath caught in her chest. "I can't promise you wealth," Jacob added, "but I can promise honesty, a place by my side, and that you'll never be alone again." The wind stirred gently around them. Mary looked at him, not as her employer, not as the man who once gave her a job when she was desperate, but as the man she had quietly chosen. Through every early morning, every gentle moment with the girls, every wordless glance shared across the dinner table, she nodded once, then again more firmly. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking like a dawn. Jacob slipped the ring onto her finger. The crowd erupted in cheers. Clara and Anna rushed into her arms, nearly knocking her over, hugging her so tightly she could barely breathe. She laughed through tears, pressing kisses to their hair. Jacob reached for her hand again, pulled her close. Their lips met in a quiet, tender kiss beneath the golden light. A moment suspended in warmth and certainty. Later at dusk, they rode out to the high ridge behind the ranch. Jacob and Mary side by side on horseback, with Clara and Anna skipping along behind on small ponies. Their laughter carried by the breeze. Below them, Rancho Silverleaf stretched wide and green. Fences stood bright with fresh paint. The windows glowed warmly. Smoke curled from the kitchen chimney. The ranch was no longer a fortress of stone and silence. It was a home. In the final light of day, Mary turned to Jacob and whispered, "You gave me more than a chance." Jacob smiled, eyes reflecting the sky. "And you gave us more than hope." Their fingers intertwined. Behind them, the laughter of two small girls rose into the twilight like a promise of peace, of family, of a future finally earned. If this story of redemption, resilience, and quiet love under the western skies touched your heart, don't ride off just yet. Tap that hype button to let us know you believe in second chances, and subscribe to Wild West Love Stories for more tales of rugged romance, courage, and the kind of love that grows where no one thought it could. We've got more coming down the trail, stories you won't want to miss. Until then, keep your heart open and your saddle ready.